Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Best of the West, the place for all things LCS and LEC. I'm your host, Shadows, and today we're talking about playoffs and what we expect, and reviewing it because we need to review this stuff because, man, the LCS was not at all what I expected, and I think what most of us expected. I think the last two weekends, both things were unexpected. I think no one expected Diggo to 3-0. Dig to get 3-0'd by 100 Thieves. I think it was surprising to everyone, but it's probably going to happen again. I don't think that's really a hot take. I'd say that's more lukewarm. But, based on the energy series we saw, that was just so sloppy. It was like an error 404, improvement not found. So I think there's no reason to really believe Dig is going to pull it out in the end. But obviously the bigger surprise was Fly versus C9. The gameplay was just unexpected from C9. The game score was unexpected. FlyQuest just looked different from what we expected and what we saw during the regular season. Like, that's obviously what it informed our expectations, but they just look very different. And I feel like, personally, Fly leveled up in between the Energy and C9 series. I was watching the highlights back to back, and I just think that FlyQuest looked better. And C9, I'm not really sure what to say, but that's kind of the question we have when it comes to C9 versus Fly. Did FlyQuest overperform? Did they surpass their expectations, play above their level? Or did C9 just play poorly? Did they just play what we know they can be? Play below their level and what we know their level can be? And obviously the two games we need to talk about are Game 1 and Game 3, but I kind of just want to go through the whole series from the perspective of C9 because we don't really know what's going on. And Cloud9, the thing is, Cloud9 was only able to win because of a misplay from FlyQuest. That's really it. If Fly fought differently in that Nexus fight, or if they focused the Nexus better, because that's what feels like what happened. They just didn't focus the Nexus enough and were focusing more on winning the fight. At least that's what I saw. They just weren't hitting enough. But yeah, there's a world where it definitely exists where Fly just 3-0'd them. And Game 1 would have also been way easier if Vulcan was playing differently. I usually watch co-streams to get my analysis because I'm not an analyst by any means. And it seems like Dom was saying that he was like throwing the game and inting fights, and he definitely was performing really bad fights. I think it was the Leona ult in FlyQuest Jungle, where he had really bad play. Game 2 was okay from C9, I suppose. I guess. Because the early game went pretty well for them, and some of the mid game was okay. And they had Drake control for most of the series, but those team fights were just not good. I would give credit to FlyQuest for playing the team fights well, and playing the team fights better, but for C9, I think they tried, but it was not the level we know. And then, obviously, Game 3. We need to talk about Game 3 because Game 3 went so bad so fast. It wasn't actually that fast. It didn't happen until 26 minutes, but just work with me here. Yeah, I don't know why in the French flying fuck they flipped Baron like that. It just makes no sense. they had no leads in the first 25 minutes, so I guess it was a bit of a Hail Mary. But the thing is, they decided to flip Baron when Blabber did not have Smite. He smited in the team fight in mid lane at 25-29. I had to go frame by frame to figure out when he smited. And you could tell by the cooldown that he had at least 40 more seconds before his smite would be back up. But for some reason, the whole team decided to rotate to Baron. I really want to hear the comms. At the time of recording this, I don't believe they've released them. But we need to hear the comms, and we need to know what was going through their minds. More importantly, what was going through Blabber's mind. Because either he didn't realize it, or he forgot to mention it, and I don't know why. I think maybe there's a possibility where he wanted to turn and fight, but why would you do that when you just blew ult in mid lane? Like, I just... It's just so disgusting. Like... I can't even try and justify what they were thinking when they did that. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't. So trying to rationalize it was impossible. Let me know in the comments if you think there's something that they could have done better. I would love to hear other opinions, but I tried to justify it and I couldn't. And this type of fighting and decision making makes me really concerned for Worlds, because yes, all 5 players did commit to the play, but you know, these somewhat or slightly poor 5-man fights against any Worlds team from the East will punish that and punish much harder. So yeah, I really don't know what to say. It's just really disgusting to see, and I'm a fan of all 3 of the teams that we expect to be going to Worlds. I have a FlyQuest jersey. I have a Team Liquid jersey. If you go back to episode 1, I was wearing that. I have a Cloud9 hoodie. But it's just really disappointing to see as a fan of Cloud9. But as a fan of FlyQuest, I like the series, which is what I had written down for Game 4, because I will not hold that against them, because FlyQuest were just playing really well. They had a really good comp. You have Orianna, Rakan, Jarvan. That's kind of hard to play against, even if you don't think Orianna is that meta. I mean, I feel like it looked meta, at least on Quad, because Quad was playing out of his mind that game. He was performing really well. Masu's arrows were on point that game, as well as in there's another game where he played Ashe, and his arrows were really good. Busio going in, his R and W engages were really good. I believe it was in the bot lane fight where they were like, went up 3-0, and even then it felt like, oh, okay, they're just done. They just won. But yeah. So I'm not going to hold Game 4 against Cloud9 and say more. That's FlyQuest being really coordinated and playing team fights well and playing really well, especially from the bot side. I feel like Busio, Masu, and Quad were playing really well in that game. Yeah. And then we have Team Liquid versus 100 Thieves, which, excuse me, I feel like there's really not much to talk about there, because it feels like a David versus Goliath story. What I wrote in my notes is, can David flex his gladiator muscles, his fighter muscles? Because we really didn't expect them to look that good against Team Liquid, but we wanted to see a level of performance where it's like, oh, okay, maybe they can 3-0 dig again and maybe put up a fight against our third world team, which most of us expect to be FlyQuest, but obviously, fuck all expectations, FlyQuest is better than Cloud9. And I'll get to 100 Thieves and Cloud9 in a bit, but first let's just talk about this series. It was a one-sided stomp, I feel like, at least in Game 1. Game 1 was such a one-sided stomp. It was like an LPL first seed versus a LEC or LCS third seed level of a stomp. Like, it was that bad. In case you forgot, it was 10 towers to 0, and they ended with a 16k gold lead. Game 2 was a little bit more of a fight. They did put up a fight a bit. They're entering the mid game. TL's gold lead was only like 1.1k, which is technically a major gold lead, but it wasn't like major until after the mid lane fight. At 18 minutes, that kind of blew the game open. They like hard won that fight, took mid tier 1, and that kind of just blew their lead, and their lead just kept growing and ballooning. They did find some good fights. There was like that fight in the jungle, and Quid was fully online, like full bandwidth online, high bandwidth usage level of online. But despite that, those fights and Quid being fully online, it barely chipped into their lead. It did shrink it a few times because of the good fights, but it was a fruitless endeavor, if you will. And I think that kind of just goes to show sort of symbolism for the story, where we want to see 100 Thieves put up a good fight, but at the end of the day, Team Liquid just feels like this insurmountable mountain. Even if we have these top 3 teams that are at their own echelon of play, even within that 3, TL feels like an insurmountable mountain because of just how good they've gotten from MSI and EWC. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. I mean, Game 3 was kind of a similar story, I feel like, but it was also a bit of a draft diff. I don't want to be the draft diff guy because everyone knows that execution matters more than draft. Like, no matter what you draft, there's like a plan to execute it. But I feel like draft diff is an argument here. I mean, you gave APA Ziggs. Let's be real. You can't spell Ziggs without GG. And speaking of the letter G, there's GP. I mean, Impact's GP is legendary for a reason. He's really good at it. And they had a really good early game. It was more like game 1 than game 2 because they just were dominating the early game. And entering the mid game, it was over 2K. I think they got to 2K around 12:30 is what I put down. But when they entered the mid game, I believe it was over 4K, if that's right. Yeah. More than 4K entering the mid game. So, I mean, what really is there to say other than 100T tried? Like, what they tried. They really tried. But it didn't really inspire confidence. But at the same time, it didn't make me worried. I mean, the only reason this would be a cause of concern for their level of performance is if you think they mental boomed. But I don't think they did. They will. I don't believe that's really possible. In my opinion, I feel like they know what's going on. And they knew that this was really not possible. All right. And with that, let's go on to predictions for what we think is going to happen this upcoming weekend and then next weekend. But I believe next weekend is only top 3. So, first of all, tomorrow we have Dignitas versus 100 Thieves, which I expect to be another 3-0, maybe 3-1 if Dig rises to the occasion, if they have that fire lit under them from that insanely disgusting series versus NRG. It was disgusting, by the way, but it was a banger. I mean, I think we all enjoyed watching that. That was like the entertainment of the week. This series doesn't really matter, but at least it was a good watch, And then there's Fly versus Team Liquid. I'm honestly not too sure about the game score, but I do think TL is definitely taking it. Probably not going to be 3-0 because of how good FlyQuest looked versus C9. So I'm going to say 3-1. Could be 3-2. Could be 3-2. Not against another 5-game series. We've had some awesome ones in the LEC and the LPL. So I'm not against that, but I'm leaning towards the 3-1. And then Cloud9 versus 100 Thieves, and this is hard to predict, honestly. Like, I have a really bad feeling about C9's mental after this, because I think they could mental boom. We kind of saw that in spring, where they mental boomed after losing to 100 Thieves. So, and 100 Thieves just looks so much better. It looks like everyone's playing better, especially Ayla. I was really surprised by Ayla's level of play in spring. Obviously, we know them doing well was the top side, stepping up. Quid just popped off. Sniper was really insane for a rookie, but with this change in the bot lane with Tomo, Ayla looks more like the TLA support we knew he could be. So, I don't know. It really depends on what we see Friday, right? It depends on the individual performances from all these players, as well as, their team play. So, my hope is 100 Thieves, but I think it's unlikely. I'm going to say it's Cloud9. But it will be a close series, whether that's by game score or just in-game. So, I'm going to say 3-2. Maybe that's too optimistic, but yeah. And then we move on to their likely match towards FlyQuest. If it's C9 and they do win, and it's a rematch, I do think it could be a closer series. But if somehow 100 Thieves, pulls out the magic, it will probably be a simple clean 3-0 for FlyQuest. And then, yeah, we all expect FlyQuest versus TL in the finals. And I think we all know how that's going to go. But yeah, that's about it for LCS. So moving on to LEC, I kind of wanted to talk about G2 a bit, but I sort of decided against it. I still want to talk about them for a little bit, because I'm just sort of not sure what to think about them right now. I think there's two major points to make, and one of them is obviously they were one game away from placing fourth and not making it to the finals. I more so blame BDS for that. That's more their fault, because game 4 was winnable. But yeah, I think they may have gotten complacent. I'm not sure what's really happened, but the only major thing I want to say about any of the players is Yike, because this man is a mega merchant for Ivern. Like, this guy is just an Ivern merchant. It's crazy. I mean, it's a meta champ, and it is really good. Like, Ivern Leona is, like, probably the best, if one of the best, if not the best, jungle support combinations in the game. But I really want him to diversify his effective champ pool, because even in the games where he wasn't playing them, he didn't look nearly as good. They 3-0'd Giant X. I remember that series. In game 2, he was playing Maokai, but he had some really weird mistakes in that game where I was like, what is going on? He made 2 massive early game mistakes on Maokai. So yeah, I just want to see him have a good early game on other champs and his effective champ pool being better. Yeah, 1 second. We love seasonal allergies. Anyway, that MDK versus Fnatic series is the other thing we need to review, because, man, that was really something else, guys. Game 3 was really sloppy. I'm not going to say game 1 and game 2 were, super clean, because they weren't. They were definitely much more one-sided, but compared to game 3, those first 2 games looked clinically clean. They were clinics. They weren't, but they looked clinically clean in comparison to game 3. It was just so sloppy. The fights were all over the place, especially the fight at 34 minutes. It was coordinated, but watching it, it's really hard. I think it was It was a Maokai engage into a Tristol. That was like definitely good, well coordinated play, but Fnatic just looked all over the place. And game 4 was even sloppier. It was basically just handball. And what I mean by that is because both teams kept throwing consecutively. Like, Gen and Humanoid were throwing the early game. They handed over the early game for free. Especially that Trist play from Humanoid at 18 minutes. That was certainly a play, to say the least. And it's not like it really matters, though, because they got really close to throwing the game. And by they, I mean Mad. Mad was really close to throwing the game. There was a top lane fight at 26 minutes, and 3 minutes later there was a fight in the bot side jungle. But, or was that Fnatic trying to throw? God, I should have put down better notes. But then there was the top lane push at around 33 minutes that led to a top lane fight. Yeah. And then from there, it was like, Mad just won because that fight went so bad. But Game 5, I don't know. Game 5, I feel like, arguably was the worst game and the most sloppy game. Yeah, they were nearly 5K ahead at 23 minutes. Mad was. Obviously, if you're watching this, I don't need spoilers protection, but they did win Game 5. They were nearly 5K ahead at 23 minutes. They got mega flanked, and for some reason, Supa just didn't flash. I feel like the game would be much more salvageable at then. But even then, even without him flashing, there were still openings back into the game. But they just gifted the game. I mean, we all heard Dracos' call. Like, the thing is, I feel like they were funnel visioned on, like, getting vision control for Soul. Because they were at Soul Point. But they were just in their jungle and just gifted them the series. It's like a Baron for Nexus trade, but on negative steroids. Because they didn't even get Baron. They didn't even get Soul. They were just trying to get vision control. Like, God, I just feel like this region is kind of doomed. So for G2 versus Mad Lions, I feel like we're going to see a similar series, but with G2 somehow winning. I don't know. It's hard to help it, but it's like, it's G2. G2 is just G2, and we all have faith in them. So I feel like they will be able to show us something better. And then G2 versus Fnatic, I think we're going to see a similar story too. Because the thing is, when Fnatic plays a team with good macro, they kind of just crumble. I would be happy if they could show us something better and manage to somehow win. But it's hard to say. So I'm just going to say 2 close series from G2. And hopefully, fingers crossed, they win. But we have no idea. Yeah, that's really it for today. I will see you guys after both finals. Obviously, finals weekend for LEC this weekend and then next weekend. So I will see you guys probably in like 3 weeks. We'll be talking about Worlds, and I want to power rank all of the players. So that's going to be a real long video. So subscribe for that. Be on the lookout for that. And that's all.